It's another day for us to shape policy, for us to inspire change on the front burners on Sook News TV. I'm blessing Eichie. Today happens to be World Radio Day, and it is celebrated because of the role radio plays in shaping society. Good news is that the Isle 104.9 FM is here to shape business, economy, and development in Africa. I have my co-host here with me as always because I do not like to fly solo. Because it's better when three heads come together and discuss an issue, then that change has a better chance of happening. Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze is here. Also, Oyinpreye Krumale is in the studio. Good morning, sir.
Good Nigeria people out there. It's another day. By the special grace of the Almighty God, we will get him better.
Okay, good news.
Blessing, blessing, blessing. Good
morning. Yes, please. When people call my name like that, the next thing is a check. How much do you want? Please bring the check.
It's a word, actually.
Okay.
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
I understand. Tomorrow is Friday.
Yes. Very glad.
Yes. So that check should come in time.
So let's just keep the fingers crossed
and see what happens.
See what Priya is able to pull off.
I hope it's not tea, sir. I don't drink tea.
It's a convention for us to take tea in the morning.
All right, the first segment of the show, as you know, if you've been following, if this is your first time, is the news headlines. So we'll take a look at some stories that have made the headlines and provide perspective on them. So the first one is that a tax reform bill has scaled second reading in the House of Representatives 6 months after President Tinubu transmitted it to the National Assembly in 2024. Recall that bill has been a subject of contention because there have been divided opinions as to the provisions of the bill. First, it was the northern leaders raising eyebrows to say, hey, what's happening regarding the VAT sharing formula as provided by that bill? But right now, it has passed second reading at the House of Representatives. Doc, it was a contentious moment even as the House deliberated over the bill before they came to a consensus and consolidated the four bills which comprise of the tax bill into one and then passed it for second reading.
Well, it's not hitting us by surprise. And if you remember some few weeks ago, Yedele has said that before this quarter ends, that bill will be signed into law by the president, and it was so determined. It's also good to see that you are having a president who understands how politics works. I usually say to people, this is the first time in the history of Nigeria that you are having a politician become the president. And so he knows how to work his way around institutions and without creating unnecessary uproars or difficulties, and then have his way in the things that he said to do. And I think we must say kudos to the president and, of course, the leadership of the National Assembly, who are also determined to see Nigerian work, especially at this point in time. That bill for us is one bill that we don't need to wish away on the altar of politics, because what we currently use are colonial instruments. And this is the first time Nigeria is taking a very serious review of its tax policies. And I think we should just allow it to stay.
Pri?
Okay. I looked at the what I call it, the mild, it's not mild anyway, but the debate in the House of Representatives. And it is still obvious from the inception of the bill, the two divide that has been contending for the straightening of some sections in the bill. That contention is still on, though in a subtle way, not as it was when the bill came to the fore. And when I looked at that, I saw some details that sometimes it's good to look at. Some members of House of Representatives are asking for definition and interpretation clause in the bill, because they felt without or the absence of that clause in the bill will be misleading and could lead some of the stakeholders to believe something wrongly, which they feel should be straightened out, and the interpretation. They were asking for the definition of derivation. So we were seeing instances where honorable members are asking, is it derivation by generation, or is it derivation by consumption? And I was looking at, this is an intellectual argument, but of course it's leading somewhere, money. That's where it's leading to. It's leading to allocation and who is on the receiving side of this allocation. Well, I want to go with Doc said earlier, what Doc said earlier on. He said you cannot completely discountenance or remove politics or politicking from this issue and from this matter, including what is being discussed in the bill. And I'm glad that the president is a politician, not just a politician, but also a businessman who was involved in several negotiations when it comes to deals. And I'm really hoping that he will see it through to the end and to the objective meaning working for the good of Nigerian people generally.
I think that the consensus of the Governors Forum was instrumental to this passage of the bill to second reading. If that had not been done, if there was no agreement regarding the VAT sharing formula, I think it would have been a rancor situation at the House of Reps. But because there had been an agreement regarding how it should be shared, 50% on equality, 30% on derivation, and then 20% based on population. So that had already sort of appeased those who were against that provision of the bill, where 60% initially was proposed based on derivation and based on consumption. So where the northern leaders had objections to it. So because that part was the major contention of the tax reform bill, that part had been settled by the Governors Forum. I think it was just easy for the House of Reps to deliberate over other aspects of it and then move on. But I think it's a success for the bill. Now that it has passed second reading, we should see some significant progress towards the passage of that bill. And maybe just by the projection of the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Fiscal Reforms and tax matters, we just get to see that that bill eventually gets passed by the first quarter. And let's hope that small businesses, which for me is one key thing that I admire about the bill, the provisions for small businesses, the tax exemptions, and how that scope has been broadened to include businesses as high as 50, who earn as high as 250 million naira. So I think we should begin to see the effect of the tax bill, maybe by the third quarter of the year, becoming visible.
Yeah, but I just think beyond what the governors have done is the fact that we live in an environment where we like to consistently duplicate efforts. The Presidential Committee on the Tax Reform did a very huge consultation even before the bills were sent to the National Assembly. So it was not that somebody wrote it and put it down. There were huge stakeholder engagement from state to state. But I just feel that somehow, while people are talking about the ease of doing business, how do we allow the seed that are planted to grow so we can eat the fruit, which of course is the mantra of this administration, that there should not be need to tax the seed. So people eat up their seed, and then of course when the planting season comes, you have nothing to plant. So the president said, look, we should be taxing fruits. And for many people out there, it's still like something strange. Except that we have not attempted to start small thing. And you see how the state structure is pushing the business that is not even getting out of the ground to go back to where it's coming from. Because we just need this to make the lifestyle of the political actors a little more comfortable. And so we tax everything taxable. And sometimes you see the kind of force with which and fuse they chase even women who are in the market trying to make a living. And at the end of the day, you find that a whole lot actually is bleeding and people are sinking daily into poverty. You see whether they are the commercial motorcycle drivers, whether they are the tricycle drivers, or even the commercial public buses. And you're wondering that somebody is loading a vehicle and one man is sitting down somewhere and is taking the money, not minding the wear and tear of the vehicle, not minding the cost of petrol and all of that. And it's quite very, very harrowing that this is the environment where businesses are functioning. And so when the tax reform bill comes, and I think these are issues that should actually address state government to see how we can, the hangman nose that is on businesses, we can throw it away so businesses can breathe and really make profit. Because that's the only way poverty can be addressed in a society like Nigeria. But I think with this passage now, let's see what stakeholders are going to also do in terms of engagement with the Finance Committee of the House of Representatives, making their claims and objections. And then from there, we'll see whether the Joint Committee of the National Assembly will eventually endorse this, and then the President has sent it so that we can make some progress.
Well, don't you think there will still be a need for a forum where there is enlightenment on the provisions of the bill? Because Priya mentioned that at the House, there was a debate regarding the meaning of derivation. So if the lawmakers want to explicitly explain what derivation means so that nothing is left out, everybody understands how the derivation is going to be shared. And so when they say derivation based on generation, derivation based on consumption, for other provisions of the bill, because this bill is 4 different bills merged into one. It encompasses a lot when we talk about Nigeria's tax regime, and even there are different provisions that concerns different sectors of the economy and different classes of people. Even for employers, you know, when we talk about the payee tax, those who are going to benefit from the exemption. So don't you think there's a need for some enlightenment so everybody understands the key aspects of the bill, not just the lawmakers, not just the critical stakeholders, but even those the bill provides for?
You see, Blessing, it's difficult to wake up a man who pretends to be sleeping.
Who's pretending in this case?
You see, if somebody is genuinely sleeping and you tap, the person wakes up, but the person who is pretending to sleep, you can tap all you care, and he's just there. And I think these are the issues. It's not that there are not sufficient enlightenment, and this is why I actually said that Oyedele did a lot in terms of engaging with stakeholders to define what these terms and concepts were. In short, they even gave a very clear example that, look at it. If you look at Kano, for example, that you do telephone calls in Kano and the VAT is paid to Lagos. That what the bill tried to reverse is that situation, that where people are consuming these substances, they should receive the VAT. So, because it's actually a value-added tax, that what value is added. So, you see, petroleum is happening in the Niger Delta, but head office of these corporations are in Lagos. And so what happens is that all the transactions that happens on that sector, then of course tax is remitted back to Lagos. But there's no operation going on in Lagos. And that's what the bill seek to address. That rather than move the taxes or the VAT to where it originates, then there was a need for it to be spread so that people who actually pay the VAT, that in that environment where that VAT was paid, they could actually be partakers of it. And I think that was fairness and that was justice. But you see, people understand some of all these things because, and I think this is where we become too simplistic in our argument. And many people who have actually argued about this thing thought as if that VAT comes only from beer. That's where the argument was. So if you ban beer in your environment, why are you taking the VAT? See, so There are a lot of vertible items on that bill. So when we become real parochial in terms of looking at some basic issues, and you're using one item example, it means that there's this intention of trying to blackmail some people so can win an argument. So that's the way I see it, and that's why I said some people who are sleeping, it's difficult to wake up any man who is sleeping. Okay. And there are a lot of people in this regard who understand, and I think these people, many of them are lawyers, many of them understand and they can read black and white. They didn't need those explanations really further. I said that it was just to see how we can blackmail and see this thing didn't really move forward.
All right. So, Blessing, one of the areas, or some other areas they were trying to call attention to, of course, they talked about the separation of the head, the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, his office, and from the tax board, that those offices should be separated, and that if it is not separated, it's going to lead to abuse of power. So one thing that one should be looking at is the powers of the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service and how he exercises those powers with regards to revenue collection and in distributing the VAT, and the same powers that he is going to wield being a member or the head of the Joint Task Board is also another thing to consider. The other thing to consider, they also looked at, Mr. Babajimi Benson, he himself came up to say, okay, the federal government used to earn about 15% of, there's a specific section that he mentioned.
Of the VAT sharing?
Of the VAT sharing, and now
for the tiers of the government.
Within the tiers of the government, it has now reduced to 10% because he's giving 5 to the states. It's because the state and local government are even more closer to the people at the head of society, and that is a sacrifice that the government is making. There is also another contention that the same bill is bringing up, and those who felt they needed this part to be trashed out. And I quickly wanted to look at that part. Apart from the transparency issue, yes, the derivation, definition, and all of that. So the thing is, they know that this bill, they know what it holds. And of course, intelligent people, lawyers, well-read, will feast on volumes of black and white texts. But the thing is, when someone feels that maybe he's not getting as much as he's going to get, and they feel a region or an entity is going to be excluded from the gains of that, because one of their arguments is that the progressive way that the Education Institution Trust Fund, the Education Trust Fund, will be completely removed from gaining or sharing from that VAT also is an issue that should be looked at, because if it is removed, that means the institutions that used to get these monies and which they used to fund specific projects in their schools or in the tertiary education sector too, will now also lose out in the process. So if it loses out from the process, where do these institutions get money to supplement, to execute the project in these institutions? So these are equally other things to consider. So the thing is, who is going to gain and who is going to lose? Is it the Nigerian people, or we are talking about
That's what we're talking about,
here?
having some enlightenment, because enlightenment basically is not for those at the upper or the green chamber or for critical
but their argument is for their constituents.
That's what I'm saying. It's for their constituents. But can we also break it down so that the common person knows what these bills are?
The common man knows. It's the elite that doesn't want to know.
Are you sure the common man knows?
Oh yes, the common man understands it, and the common man are happy that progress has been made. You see, one of the arguments that has bedeviled this nation in the last 2 decades is the argument about restructuring. The need to practice a true fiscal federalism, where states are semi-autonomous and they are not, to use that language again, using the feeding bottle from the center. like the American Federation, where royalties and what gets to the federal, and still generate their resources to drive whatever thing that's happening. So almost all federations, it's only Nigerian federations that you see that component units have to rely always on the center. And this reliance is not because that we actually have any interest of our people who are the grassroots in the heart. It is the elite who benefit from this vast federation, where, as they say in our village, Mokin they walk, Babu they chop. So it is the elite. And I don't think that they need so much of enlightenment, except that they just want to distort some progress that's being made toward a fiscal federalism, where states have to actually sit down. See, all the argument about creation of more states is because we know that there's one region that supplies resource. If it was on the merit of financial viability, nobody will move that motion in the National Assembly to say, oh, we want further more creation of states. Because the states that are there right now, a number of them are not viable, let alone even breaking them and asking. So these are the challenge that we're talking about fairness, we're talking about equity, we're talking about a federation that works, where everybody can feel a sense of belonging, and nobody is feeling cheated, nobody is feeling deprived, and we're all moving at the same pace, and there's competition between states to develop. This is what the argument is all about, and not the letters of the bills.
Okay, let's just wait to see what happens. Now the bill is scaled, it has been passed to second reading. So let's see if at the end of this month or even the first quarter of the year, it becomes an act. Well, it's just going to be a relief for low-income earners, those who earn about 800,000 and below annually, so they would be exempted from paying tax. I don't know why Priye is...
It's I just don't
reacting to that.
Yeah, I don't. We shouldn't even be saying that, trying to use it to lure.
Why would
you want people to earn, someone in this time of the day, in this time of the economy, to earn 800,000 naira annually?
As it is what it is.
800,000 naira.
As it is what it is. Yes, that's not enough money. But there are people who earn that. And so what the bill provides for is that they are exempted.
So if you go by the 77,000 naira that the government is supposed to pay now as a minimum wage, nobody will be on that strata.
Okay, so that's the point. That's why there still needs to be enlightenment, not just of those at the top echelon. For those who are at the common man on the street needs to understand. And because we are a forward-thinking institution, a forward-thinking media organization, to help shape policies, to help inspire change, and to bring to your knowledge information that you should know, we've put together a documentary where the key provisions of the tax bill are there. So you can watch. We'll have that come up today again, so you can watch and understand in case for any reason you do not understand what the bill provides for. But I do know that there are certain aspects of the bill that may need to be reviewed as time goes on. When we get into maybe the next year, there will be call again by Labour for increase in wage and at that time. So maybe that part of the bill will have to be reviewed so that a lot of people can benefit from it. But basically, these are some of the provisions of the bill. The VAT sharing formula, which has been agreed upon, and then the tax exemption for low-income earners, which if you do some calculation, you find that people who would really benefit from that are not much because of the increase in wage. But that part can be reviewed. And then there is the part that has to do with small businesses, which I think it's a good one. Initially, the provision was, or the recommendation of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee was 50 million. Those who earn about 50 million, but then they later raised it to 250 million. So it covers a lot of businesses. That's a good one. So a bill cannot be perfect. at the initial stage. That's what I think. So we do not expect that this bill is perfect. As time goes on, there will be aspects of it which is one that you have noted because of the increase in pay of workers. So it will not cover a lot of people. So those parts of the bill can be highlighted later on and reviewed. But in the meantime, we can have this and then work on it as time goes. So
yeah, but I just feel that what for me is that there are a lot of center of pressure, and that's just the truth. Because one of the issues that we're not even talking about is the centralization of revenue collection. Because the bill actually empowered that the National Revenue Collection Agency become one, and every other institution of government are no longer collecting revenue.
Yes.
And that, of course, it will go a long way in also helping to resolve some of the challenge in terms of revenue collection. If you check the 2024 budget that is being operated at the moment, you discover that for NNPC, Custom, FRIS, the cost of collection of revenue was over 400 billion. Because efforts are duplicated. Now, of course, that also will cut down on cost of governance. And like you have said, of course, we're also talking about governance issues in terms of having the chairman of the Revenue Collection Board, also agency, also the chairman of the board. And at the end of the day, it's like you become a judge in your own case. And so there's no governance. Now, all these transparency measures are what the bills are putting in place. And then you can see your money in real time. And those leakages that we have seen over the years, where monies are filtering away, and of course they are reduced to the barest minimum. And I think to that extent, the bill is as progressive as anybody would think. And of course also for the fact that it has taken into account the poor and people who are vulnerable. Yes, talk about minimum wage of 77,000, and I can tell you there are a lot of people who are not earning 30,000 even as we still speak on this economy, especially those who don't work for government. And I think they have to be considered actually.